Good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning, Brighter Day family. Host Pastor Isaac here, and we are so excited that you have joined with us again this morning. Here it is again, beloved. This is a very important week that we are embarking upon, and we are excited about it. This morning, as we are continuing down developing leadership, developing that leadership that's within us, and we have to take personal responsibility for developing the leadership that's within us. Yes, what I mean by taking full responsibility is that we have to put ourselves in position where learning can occur. And not only can learning occur, but as we increase our capacity for leadership, as we increase our capacity for responsibility, as we increase our capacity for influence, as we increase. Are you catching the word? Increase, increase, increase. We ought to increase in every area of our life. And as we are increasing our capacity, something is going to have to change. Because look at this. When you increase capacity, if we take a look at Moses' life, he was in the process of trying to counsel millions of Hebrews once they came out of Egypt. And his father-in-law, Jethro, informed him, counseled him, encouraged him to seek out leaders who he could delegate to certain areas of responsibility. And this morning, as we continue to develop the leadership within us, a key element is learning what areas I have to release into the hands of others that can carry that share of the load. A great leader looks for leaders that they can develop, leaders that they can share information, share tasks with. If you're going, excuse me, if we're going to increase our capacity, if we're going to enlarge the territory that is available to us, we have to learn to delegate responsibilities. But it's not enough to delegate the responsibility. You have to make sure that you've developed the individuals to whom the responsibilities have been delegated to. And one element of great leaders is finding leaders that have a heart for the purpose that you're in. And remember, every purpose has a season. So don't hold on to things where their season has expired. There are some key things, beloved. In my quiet time this morning, as I was looking at this, and I'm going through how to identify those areas that I've just been busy in, but really it's just been occupying time, and time is an element that we can't afford to lose. When you look at your daily activities and you ask yourself the critical questions, great leaders question themselves and the activities that they are involved in, or the activities that they are assigning or delegating, because every activity should be producing positive results. if it's not assisting you in accomplishing the mission, it's unnecessary. When you're going to delegate it and you ask yourself the question, can someone else handle this task? And if the answer is yes, because it always is yes, then you must release that task so that they in turn can become a productive member of the village, of the community that you're building. Is that task truly essential to the mission? What is the purpose? Does it serve a purpose? Come on, somebody. Is it helping the bigger picture? When I started asking myself these questions, I understood how to grow my community, how to grow my team, how to grow my security, how to grow my value. That, beloved, ladies and gentlemen, is a sign of great leadership. Throughout my time in the military, I was trained from day one, which is something that is completely opposite of how corporate America thinks. In the military, if you're going to advance to the next rank, the next level, if you want a promotion, you have to train yourself out of a job, meaning you have to ensure that the person that's behind you is capable of doing what you're currently doing. Teach them how to do your job, and someone else is teaching you how to do their job. That, beloved, that, ladies and gentlemen, is how true leadership thinks. And every time I was running after advancement, and I had one of the greatest leaders, I had several great leaders, and the first one that I had was when I was stationed in San Francisco. I was on the USS, the Gray, a Knox-class frigate. And I worked for a senior chief. I was a third class at the time. I had a second class in front of me and two first class in front of me. Your first class is one level below chief, and they are responsible, they should be responsible for running the division, assigning all of the daily tasks, making sure all of the safety protocols are in place. And my senior chief, I can't explain it. I couldn't explain it then, but I can explain it now. As a third class, he would pull me into the office, and he started showing me how to write up the daily plans, how to make assignments for daily maintenance, how to do the 3M reporting. He taught me how to run a damage control locker. He started teaching me everything I needed to know about the division as a third class. And I'm sitting here. We would go out to sea, come back. Everybody would be able to go home once the ship got moored. And he would say, he couldn't pronounce my name Doyle. He could not say Doyle. He'd say, Doc. And I'd be like, yes, senior. He said, we got to get this done. And I'm sitting there. And I'm like, we just came back off of deployment. Everybody going home to be with their family. My wife, my children on the pier. I can't leave. My first class has left. My second class has left. The division is left. But you got me in the office talking about we need to start preparing for next week, next month, next quarter. But I couldn't say anything because he's my leader. I'm frustrated, angry inside. And we pull in at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. It's 7 o'clock at night. And I'm still there. And we're still going over stuff. And about 8 o'clock, he says, all right, you can go home now. But I'll see you in the morning. And he did this day after day after day. It got to the point where Lady D wouldn't even come to the pier when we would pull in. She said, look, you just call me when you're ready to leave, and I'll come and get you. But the thing that really showed me why was we went on a refresher training over to Hawaii. And everything that he had showed me and was training me became second nature to me during the refresher training. We were over there for a month, and they were putting the ship through all of its paces, how to fight the ship, how to, in case of damage and all of these other things. And we just wasn't clicking. I had a junior officer who was in charge of the repair locker. I had senior petty officers assigned to the repair locker. And you're on a timer. And everything is graded based on time. How long did it take you to patch a hole in the side of the ship? How long did it take you to put a fire out? Come on, somebody. How long did it take you to don your OBAs? How long did it take this? How long did it take that? And we were constantly failing, which meant we couldn't return home. And I got so sick and tired of watching those that were supposed to be in charge fumble on every hand. I mean, couldn't make the right assignments, couldn't do none of it. And it got to the point where I want to go home. So what did I do? I took everything that my senior chief had taught me. General quarters would sound. I got into that repair locker, and I started telling my repair locker officer, listen, this is what we need to do. This is who's going to do this. I'm going over here. I'm going over there. I'm going to do this, and he's going to do that. And I started raising my voice and demonstrating what was needed for us to be successful, not realizing that I was being observed and watched by the evaluators throughout the ship. It got to the point that they started killing me, not literally, but they would take you and say, okay, you're dead. They would take you out of the equation because they knew you knew what you were doing, and they wanted to prove everyone else. And it got to the point where they would start taking me out. And when they would take their eyes off of me, I would run back in and help my team. And about 3 days after I started doing this, our time started getting better. I'm not patting myself on the back, ladies and gentlemen. What I'm saying is that when you get the right training
and you start rehearsing and practicing your craft, and you start reviewing the task at hand, and then you start looking at others around you that you can assign things to and help develop them so that they in turn now can become successful and the entire mission can succeed. That's leadership. All I did was use the information and the training that my senior chief had given me because I wanted to go home. And like I said, about 3-4 days into this, my senior chief pulls me aside and he says, Doc, I don't know what you've done, but our grade in your locker is going up. Keep it up. Keep doing what you're doing. He didn't ask me anything. He just said, keep doing what you're doing. I heard that you started taking charge. Keep doing what you're doing. And I said, yes, senior. It got to the point where the executive officer and the commanding officer got wind of what I had done. And we had our final mission, which is called a mass conflag, where the entire ship is under attack. Every repair locker is deployed. You have chemical warfare that you're doing. You have sub-warfare that you're doing. I mean, it's everything. And soon as the general alarm went off, the senior evaluator for the refresher training team came to my locker, put his hand on my shoulder, and said, I'm not even going to let you leave. I'm staying right here. Because if you leave, we know they're going to succeed. Because you're going to go here, you're going to go there. We know what you've done. And I was frustrated until that senior evaluator said, listen, all of my team have observed what you've done, and we've seen how you started training these junior sailors. Trust them. Trust them. Trust what you've done to help them be successful. And I was like, but I can't just sit here. He said, yes, you can. They got it. And to my amazement, my repair locker, which was repair locker 3, had the best time during that mass conflag. Came out number 1 from worst to first. What am I saying? Is that when you make up your mind that you're not going to fail at whatever it is that you're doing, and you're going to gather your team around you, and you're going to pour into them, unlike corporate America, which says, get all you can it, sit on it, because if I teach you what I know and you know what you know, then I'm out. That is contrary. That is totally contrary to true success. Every leader should have an exit plan. Every leader should have a succession plan. That's an exit plan, by the way. Training someone to take their place, because there are greater things that they have to do. And if you don't have greater things in front of you, you're wasting time. So at the end of that training, we succeeded. And when we got back to San Francisco, once again, we pull in, everybody gets to go home, except me. I'm in the office with my senior chief again. And he's preparing us for deployment, because you go through refresher training before you can deploy. And he's got me writing up underway replenishment briefs. I'm a third class. I got a second class, a first class, a first lieutenant, but he's got me writing the underway replenishment briefs to present the information to the commanding officer and the entire wardroom of department heads, walking them through what's going to take place when we come side by side alongside another ship for replenishment. Replenishment means either we taking on field or we taking on stores. He's got me doing these underway replenishment briefs, making the preparations for all of this. 8 o'clock come, I get to go home. That was every single day. 2 weeks before our deployment. We've been home for a couple of months. 2 weeks before our deployment, I'm in the office because that's what I do. Making assignments for everyone, their maintenance assignments, their cleaning assignments, whatever it is that we had to do every day. I'm doing that while the first class is sitting in the first class lounge. The second class is they over supervising people, but I'm writing out all of the daily assignments. And right before our deployment, the commanding officer, they normally have CO's call, and everybody gathers on the flight deck. That's where the helicopters and stuff land. His podium is out there. And everybody, the entire command, is sitting there watching him and listening to him. I'm in the office. They ain't gonna miss me. Next thing I know, the commanding officer gets on the 1MC, which is the intercom system, and he calls me by name. He's like, Petty Officer Doyle, flight deck, immediately. And I'm like, wait, that's the commanding officer. What is he doing calling me? I run to the flight deck. He begins to go up one side, me down the other side, because I had disobeyed his order to come to the flight deck. And he says to me, he says, now, after he goes up one side, down the other side, there's nothing I can say. My senior chief, my department head, my first lieutenant, they're all standing right beside the commanding officer. And I'm like, oh man, I am in big trouble. And the XO comes up to me and just starts shaking his head like this. So I realize I'm in major trouble. But then the commanding officer says, this captain's call is for one person and one person only. This captain call is for Petty Officer Doyle. And I'm like, wait, captain's call or captain's mass? Did I misunderstand what he said? Because captain's mass is when you get in trouble. Captain's call is when they do awards and all this other stuff. And he begins to share with the entire command a letter that the lead training evaluator had written to him about me and my efforts during that refresher training, how I made the impact and how I turned my repair locker from worst to first. And I had received a Navy Accommodation Medal as a result of it. Then my executive officer, a few months later, I'd taken my exam for second class. And I had made assignments to my team. And y'all know I'm vertically challenged. And I had guys 6'5", 6'6". Huge guys that worked for me. I walk into one of the areas where I had made assignments for them to do certain tasks, and they were goofing off. And unbeknownst to me that the executive officer was on the other side of that room and I couldn't see him. But I went off on these guys because they were goofing off. I had the second class in there along with them, supposed to be supervising them, so I'm going off on all of them. Because it's called dereliction of duty. When you've been given an assignment and you're failing to complete your assignment, that's dereliction of duty. And I'm going off on them all. Not just the seaman and no, even the second class. I'm going off on him. And after I completely go off on them and they get back to work, the executive officer walks up behind me, tapped me on the shoulder. And he tells me, he says, Petty Officer Doyle, you're going to captain's mass. Now remember, captain's call is for awards. Captain's mass is for demotions and everything else. You're going to captain's mass tonight. And I was like, sir? He says, you were totally disrespectful to a senior petty officer just now. I said, but they were goofing off, not doing their job. I'm a third class. And I get to captain's mass that night. I realize I got one chevron, one stripe, and it's about to get taken. The executive officer and the commanding officer got my entire chain of command there. Now, this is after I had received the Navy Accommodation Medal, Achievement Award. I'm standing before the captain, and the charges have been read. He says, do you have anything you would like to say for yourself? And I said, sir, it's my responsibility to ensure that these assignments get done. I've been tasked by my senior chief to make sure that this job gets done. He looks at my senior chief and he says, Senior, what do you have to say for Petty Officer Doyle's behavior? My senior chief says, he did exactly what I would have done. He looks at my first lieutenant. What do you have to say? All the way through my department head. They all said the same thing. The executive officer then turns around and smiles at me. And the commanding officer then reads a citation. He says, your behavior is not that of a third class, but your behavior is that of a second class or above. And tonight, you're no longer a third class. I'm realizing, okay, now I'm in trouble. You're now a second class. I got promoted that night. Why? Because the training I had received from my senior chief, who told me, don't look at the faces, don't look at the chevrons of the ones ahead of you. Do their job and be better at their job, and you will get promoted. You may not be the best exam taker, because I've shared with you guys my struggles in education, that I had issues when it came down to my comprehension from things that was written, because I'm a hands-on type learner. You put something in my hand and show it to me. Let me do it. You ain't got to worry about having to retrain me. Put something in a book. It takes me a little bit longer. But I thank God that he's allowed me to obtain wisdom, knowledge, and understanding for comprehension. I realize how I learn. And somehow my senior chief realized that I needed to be doing something in order for me to get it. But when I got it, he knew I had it. And the greatest compliment that I got from him was this. We were getting ready to make a deployment. And he had a family emergency. And at this time, the first class had departed the ship, transferred. The second class that was ahead of me transferred. I had one first class remaining. And I gave him special assignments. Don't know, the guy was book smart, so he could take exams and ace every exam. But when it came down to being practical, he was lost. So my senior chief went to the commanding officer, put his leave papers in. The commanding officer was like, wait a minute. Well, who's going to be in charge? And he said, Petty Officer Doyle got it. And the commanding officer said, yep, he got it. And he signed my senior chief's leave papers. And he went home while we got deployed. Now I'm running the entire division as a second class with a first class who was doing special assignments. I'm making the watch bills out. I'm making underway replenishment briefs and giving the briefs. And when we get on station, I'm the safety officer wearing the white hat. And I trained another third class how to be my station guy. I wore the white hat, he wore the yellow hat. Yellow hat meant you were in charge. White hat meant you was the safety officer. I had the first lieutenant, the department head, all of them stood behind me while I did the safety for that operation. Ladies and gentlemen, that's just one testimony. Now, I'm not saying this to brag or boast, but I'm talking about when you have great leaders in front of you who will develop you so that you in turn can do the same, which is totally contrary to corporate thinking. Been on both sides of the spectrum. People are afraid to help you on the corporate side because they fear that they're going to lose their job if you learn something. You got to go out and get it on your own. That's backwards to me. I've trained myself out of jobs so that I can advance. That's been my mantra. I saw my father do that. When I worked with him in New Orleans on the riverfront as a longshoreman, I watched my dad train his crew on how to properly load, balance ships with grain. I saw him on the chalkboard writing out the plan of the day so that everyone knew exactly what their assignment was. And I saw my dad, instead of sitting in an office where he was the foreman, he didn't have to do it, but I saw my dad come out the office, go up to the ship, and train and observe and do. I saw him take the shovels. I'm talking these shovels here. They're huge. And I saw him get right there with his guys work side by side with them to help them get the job done. But when it was time to observe for safety, he was there at the rail to ensure that his guys were safe. And then the pass down that he would give to the night crew was second to none. So I thank God for great leaders that I've had before me. And I just got on, and I'm on here for a long time today, but that was one example or two examples of great leaders that I've had in my life. Because when I became a first class and I got assigned to the George Phillip, this chief that I worked with, his name is Trent Cook. And he was a young chief, but his skills and his knowledge was superior. And him and I would butt heads a lot. And he never budged. But we would bump heads. But I realized he was right, and I had to sit down and I had to humble myself under his leadership because I saw in him something that I wanted. He was wise beyond his years. And he showed me stuff that my senior chief didn't show me. We were on a different type of ship, granted. But he was doing the same thing, and that's what I found funny. He would do the same thing with me as my senior chief did with me. He would give assignments to me, and he would leave. He'd go home. And when he came back, I had to have it completed. He trained me so hard and pushed me so hard. And he told me, in order for you to put khakis on, you can't just be doing my job. You have to do the first lieutenant's job, which meant I now had to get officer level type qualifications. And I was like, wait a minute. You want me to go and do what? And he was like, you can do this. So I got my junior officer to deck underway qualifications, which meant I was driving the ship. Then I got my officer of the deck qualifications underway, where I was in charge of the ship during my watch, my 4 hours, which meant I had direct line to the commanding officer if I needed. I'm talking to CIC. I'm talking to the chief engineer, the weapons officer, all of them. And as a result of that, we underway, and I realized all of this was because of leadership. Someone saw something in me, and they didn't give up on me. And they showed me how not to give up on myself. If I can leave this with you this morning, Know that the greatness in you no longer is going to allow you to be complacent, to be passive. The hunger for success has gripped you in a way now that you cannot ignore it. I would encourage you today, evaluate your environment. Change what needs to be changed. Release what's not productive. Hold on to that which is pulling you in the right direction. But don't just hold on. Reach forward. Use that momentum to excel and to promote yourself to the next level of leadership. I'm so grateful for Dale Duffield. He was my senior chief. I'm so grateful for Trent Cook. I'm so grateful for Mike Jackson. They were my two greatest influencers on the George Phillip. Mike was a storekeeper, a chief storekeeper at the time. Trent was my bosun. And they pulled, they pushed, they beat, not literally, but they beat in me what was possible if I didn't give up. And they showed me what success looked like by their leadership. And what's interesting is this. As troublesome as our culture is today, and as bad as it was in the military, because I can tell y'all some horror stories about the racial issues that I went through in the military. But what's interesting to me is that these leaders, Dale Duffield, didn't look like me. Took me to his home here in north parts of Washington, north of Seattle. I get to his home. His youngest daughter at the time looks at me and just staring at me. And I ask him, I say, Senior, is everything okay? And he looks at me and says, he starts laughing. He says, oh man, it's all right. She's never seen a black man in person. He lived on an Indian reservation. And I was like, what? He said, no. You see how far we are away from the main? His son was a fisherman. And if y'all seen Deadliest Catch, that was his son's job. He worked in the Bering Sea. He didn't look like me, but he believed in me. Trent didn't look like me, but he believed in me. Mike looked like me and believed in me. I had all of my leadership that didn't look like me throughout my military career, but they valued my work ethic. They valued what they saw in me, and they made available to me and gave me access into areas that others at my level were never allowed. That's the greatness that's in you. That greatness in you is going to grant you access to environments that you're not qualified for. That's favor. I decree and declare the favor be upon your life today. Don't settle for where you are. Pursue your goals. Pursue your vision. Make the difference for your family today. Get up and get moving. I believe in you. And if there's anything that myself, Lady D, can do to help you, let us know. I want to thank God for you. I want to thank God for all of the well wishes that was commented to us, text to us, the phone calls on last Friday. Lady D and I celebrated 38 years of marriage. She's my greatest supporter, my greatest stabilizer. She's my rock. Been with me through the highest of highs and the lowest of lows. Always have been there to encourage me and to remind me of the greatness that's possible. So this morning, as we close this morning, this broadcast, we want you to understand that evaluate what's around you. Look for members that are part of your team that you can delegate specific tasks to and help them to develop their leadership. Trust your team to do their part so that the capacity of what's assigned to you can be realized. You can't shoulder all of it by yourself. Learn to trust the team that's assigned to you. Don't give it to them and then micromanage it. If you have to micromanage it, that means that you don't trust them. The leaders I had would give it to me and they would walk away, and when they returned, they would evaluate what I'd done. And one of the greatest things they would do for me, if I didn't dot every I and cross every T correctly, they wouldn't scold me. They would show me the areas that I missed through questions. They would question my decision on how I came to that conclusion. Well, what was it that you saw that brought you to this decision? How did you get here? And they would say, okay, so now let's look at it this way. What would happen if we did this instead of doing that? And I would be like, oh, I see now. This would happen if I did it that way. And they'd be like, exactly. That's how we want you to think. Don't just think this. See the big picture. We all can focus on this little bit right here. But how does this fit into the bigger picture. And when you realize your part is to assist and enable the bigger picture to be successful, you increase the intensity in your efforts, because you realize once you complete this, you're now going to be entrusted with a little bit more, which means your capacity is increasing, as well as the organization's capacity is increasing. That's leadership. Increase capacity through delegating authority. But you can't just delegate authority without making sure that training has already taken place so that that person whom you delegated to can be successful. And you don't have to know everything. That's the key, beloved. You don't have to know it all. But what's great is that when you find individuals who want to partner with you that have experience in areas that you don't be intimidated by it. Invite it. Let them share their gifts and talents with you. As they begin to share their gifts and talents, your capacity increases, your value and your worth increases, your influence increases, your exposure increases, your influence on the entire organization is elevated, because people now see that you can trust others, which means now they can trust you. I pray that this has blessed somebody today. Be encouraged. Increase your capacity by expanding your reach. And you expand your reach through others. I don't want to close, but I got something that I have to go and get done. So this morning, Father, in Jesus' name, we pray that your children, God, would allow the borders of their territory to be expanded. Help them to reach beyond the borders through trusting the team that has been assigned to them. Teach them through your wisdom, through your knowledge, how to build confidence in their team, in the members of their team. Teach them how to lead by example, and then how to delegate that authority, as Christ did with the disciples. He led them, he taught them, and he delegated into them. He left a comforter for us. And Father, I thank you now that leadership development for 2021 being a focal point, that your children and their children will increase in capacity for greatness. God bless, and God bless.